to THA Talks, for free thought and open minds.
And for freedom of speech.
Hello, I'm Paul Obitelli. Welcome to another edition of THA Talks, the alternative podcast show from the UK. Our talks include news, conspiracy, spirituality, the occult, science, history, art, philosophy, religion, and much more. If you'd like to check out our full archive, just go to www.thatalks.com to listen to or to download all our free content. And if there's anyone who'd like to contact us and give us some feedback, maybe you'd like to recommend a guest for the show, you can email us info@thatalks.com. And don't forget, you can subscribe to the show via our RSS feed, and you can also find us on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, YouTube, and many other podcast directories out there. Well, hello everyone, thanks for tuning in. I do apologise if my voice is a little bit hoarse. I've got a little bit of a cold. Strange time to have a cold because you've had some really nice weather. It always feels odd getting a cold when it's so sunshiny. But anyway, I have, so apologies if my voice sounds a little bit hoarse and strange. But I'll battle through. And we've had some interesting news today. Tommy Robinson has been released on bail after his court appeal. They've quashed his previous conviction that was handed to him a couple months back in May. So that's set a cat among the pigeons because a lot of people had their views on that. Now he's still going to have another hearing, but he's going to have time to prepare, get his own solicitors in order, and they're going to be able to watch the video and argue their case. So the feeling I get from the feelers of his legal team and those around it is this is good news and things should be okay. I've made my feelings clear on why I supported Tommy in this case. You can go to our website www.thatalks.com and check out the THA thoughts in there. I put my thoughts down on that, and so I'm pleased he's been released. But it's going to be an interesting few days on that, hearing what he's got to say. He looked quite kind of skinny and drawn. And when the Sky News wanted to interview him, they wanted to interview him now, right? Not. They didn't touch it really around the time because there was restrictions, and even after then, they didn't really touch it much. They didn't really want to know much about it, but now they do, and it was a great opportunity for him to say he didn't want to speak to Sky News. He's going to speak to the people directly, and he correctly asserted that the people of Britain are fed up with the mainstream media. They're just irresponsible and fake news, as Donald Trump likes to say. It's fake news all the time, manipulative, and they're very good at it, but people are waking up to it. So there's going to be interesting developments on that. But we are going to be addressing something slightly different today, and we're going to be welcoming back our wonderful Reverend David Parry, who's going to be speaking with us in a few seconds. In fact, why wait? Because we can go to the other side of London for a surge and a dramaturge and a man called David Parry.
Priest and dramaturg. Oh, Paul, nobody does it better. Makes me feel sad for the rest. I've got a summer cold, everybody. Nobody does it half, oh God, wasn't it awful? Half as good as you. Baby, you're the best. I can't remember the rest of the lyrics to that song. Good evening, Mr. Obitelli. Why do people in London sneeze and cough in your face, the rude bastards, and end up giving you summer colds without a buy your leave? And I hate this city. You Brexiteers can all stew in your own vermin and disease. So I've had enough of London and enough of all of it. Apart from that, it's lovely to speak to you again.
I didn't think there was any Brexiteers in London, was there? I thought it was all firmly a Remainer camp, but we'll...
Yeah.
Well, anyway,
That's a good point.
Regarding your singing, I have to be totally honest. The best part of it was when there was a few crackles from the poor internet connection.
Thank you.
Sorry,
Thank you.
you know.
not only am I out of practice, you see, but I've got this bloody summer cold.
Yeah, no, I've got that as well. It seems to be going round at the moment. There seems to be these big bursts of it in the UK at the moment. Just sort of, all of a sudden, someone's got it, and then half the country has it, and they're all talking about it. It's quite strange.
Yeah, big bursts where they're sneezing in your face on the tube. I have got to get away.
Yeah.
Please, you angels, help me get away. Why do those plans never work? Anyway, your hero, your Oppo's out of jail, I hear.
Well, yeah, he's out. You know, it's not a done thing yet. He's going to have a retrial, but it's quite positive that they've accepted that. The fact that they've accepted that trial was, well, a kangaroo trial basically is pretty positive. So, and he's already served 2 months, so they reckon it will probably be a case of, okay, mistake, you've already served time, end of story, don't do it again, kind of thing.
Gosh, I don't know. Yeah. I mean, liberalism means many different things, but it must mean equal rights for all. I was shocked, as you know, Paul, by the whole thing. I mean, you know, a series of clearly politically motivated arrests across the summer.
Oh, well, this is just it. It wasn't just about, I mean, the Tommy thing was an icing on top of the cake because he's covered a lot of, and he's spoken to a lot of people. You have like the Lauren Southern case where she's literally been banned from entering the UK for criticising Islam. There's no other way of that's exactly what it is. And a lot of people don't know about it. And that is very, very bad for this country. We don't do that normally. And it's just, people see stuff like that. And I think what happened with the Tommy situation is it was just the icing on the cake. They said, right, this is it, because he's such a popular figure, you know.
Yeah, but Paul, who's to blame? All of us. All of us. We let the gangsters of Westminster get away with murder. I'm not saying everybody down there's a gangster, yada, yada, yada. I'm not saying everybody's a crook down there. I don't go along with those views. But there's a fair percentage you need to punch up the hooter and to resign or be sacked.
Yeah. Well,
and most of them just happen to be in government at the minute.
I would like to see both the Reds and Blues jog on by and say, look, you've had your chance. You've both been as bad as each other over the years. Bye-bye, and bring someone else and something completely new into it. But whether we'll see that or not, well, according to British Fight, who we've had on the show last week, that's on the cards. So perhaps it will, you know, who knows?
Oh, optimism. I think I'm a bit too low in the tooth for that. People love being slaves. I absolutely don't know why. It confuses me no end, but people seem to love it. Okay, live with it. Yeah. So, as I say, Paul, that do you know this isn't a country I recognise anymore? It's absolutely bewilderingly strange
and very worrying.
That's a different show, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, we've got. I mean, we're probably touching on in some cases a similar area. But this is definitely your show. This is one of your guests that you know, and you thought would be a great subject to cover with this young man. I will leave you to tell our listeners who we're going to be speaking with today.
Well, we're talking to a young prodigy. I don't throw around words like that. You know, everybody's a genius, everybody's this, everybody's that nowadays. But sometimes the real thing emerges. I mean, my young friend is 23 of all things. He's already got a bachelor's, a master's. He's a qualified history teacher. Those are from the 2 degrees are from the University of Aberystwyth in Wales. PGCE history in history. He's just about to embark on a second master's degree at UCL, University College London. And he's already qualified in international intelligence, politics, relations. I mean, it's all very, very fascinating. I'm making a pig's ear of this evening because I don't feel well. But, you know, for someone of that age to have his finger on the international pulse and to know sort of, you know, what the intelligence community is trying to achieve, if there's such a thing as a unified intelligence community, which I think we all take as read, but maybe that's just not the case at all. Maybe they've got their own problems. And I thought, well, let's get him on the show. Isn't this fascinating? Let's see what we can come up with. So I invited him on, talk to you, and I think we're going to have an absolutely fascinating chinwag this evening.
It sounds good. And obviously we like to sort of experiment with different subjects and so on this show. So what are we going to be talking with him about?
Espionage, spying, and your old favourite conspiracy theorisation.
Okay, and what is the name of this gentleman?
Daniele Irandoost is half Iranian, half Romanian. So I mean, some people say that's giving him a unique insight into these affairs. Either way, I mean, he's a highly trained person. He's obviously been groomed for the top. I mean, you don't do that much by that age and go in circles. I think that's interesting. And, since he's already contributed a number of publications to websites like International Relations, very, very prestigious. I thought we should talk about his expertise. Obviously we can't get into great depth with one particular show, but we can see what that side of the equation is talking about and what sort of discourse is motivating them. As I say, if they're a unified body. I used to love the X-Files, and it came up with them every now and again. Different factions in the intelligence community were actually at war. They weren't all working together to enslave people. Some were, but some were not. And I remember thinking at the time, not that the X-Files is anything apart from a drama, yada, yada, yada. It was a very good drama in its day, but it was being milked to death at the minute. And, let's not take things at face value, because the minute we do, I think we start losing our grasp of the sort of diversity of what reality actually is.
Yeah.
So let's get him on and from an insider, let's see what's going on.
Well, let's go and do this.
Good evening, Daniele Irandoost, and welcome to THA Talks.
Good evening, David. How are you?
I know that's somewhat artificial since we know each other rather well, but it's protocol. It's protocol. I am dying because I don't know why it's all research this evening, because bloody people in London sneeze in your face and cough all over you. But apart from those ignorant bastards, I'm okay. How are you this evening, Dan?
Yeah, not bad. I just come from work. I was teaching EFL today, so it's a bit. I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you're doing well in the lead up to your second masters, of course, at University College. So I mean, you're doing well. You're doing well, and we're both very grateful that you've taken time out of your schedule to be on the show. I mean, to start with, I mean, would you tell our listeners something about your background generally? I mean, I've mentioned you're half Iranian, half Romanian.
Yeah.
And maybe something about your interest in intelligence studies. I mean, tell us about your origins and why you got interested in that particular field.
Right. Well, I came to the UK when I was 15, so I'm half Romanian, half Iranian. Basically, after school, after finishing my studies, so GCSEs and A-levels, I went to Aberystwyth University to do a bachelor's in international politics and intelligence studies. And then I went on and did my first master's degree in intelligence and strategic studies. Then I did a PGCE in history, which I finished recently, and now I'm an EFL teacher, so that's English as a foreign language. So I'm teaching at English Studio currently, and I'll be starting my second master's degree at UCL this September in philosophy of education. So a big change of direction, but I think it's probably beneficial for the long term. So.
But you see, I mean, is it an actual change of direction, or is there something deeper going on? I mean, why were you interested in the world of the intelligence community in the first place? And is it still there? Is that interest still there?
Well, I mean, I grew up with this sort of goal to work for the intelligence agencies, really. I used to watch James Bond films and those sorts of things, Mission Impossible, for instance, and that sort of inspired me to aim for this sort of profession. Is it still there? Do I want to do it in the future? Maybe. I'm not really sure. It really depends on the circumstances. It's not really, I suppose it's not really in my hands, so I'm not sure. But yeah, as you said, I mean, I did say that there's a change of direction now with regards to my second master's degree. But I mean, if you look a bit deeper, there are close links between the two. So education and intelligence. Obviously, in the UK, the government is quite worried about terrorism. So extremism in schools. It's worried that young people might be sort of attracted to extremist ideas. So I suppose that's a very good sort of a link between the two disciplines.
You see, I wonder why this is such a new interest. I mean, on the surface, of course, it's the sort of double-edged attitude they have towards the worlds of Islam. Hypocritical to the last, but people know my opinions. I mean, I wonder how new this actually is. I mean, we've talked off air about spies even being mentioned in the Bible, of course.
Yeah.
And how the intelligence community finds that important. I mean, tell us a little more about that.
Well, I mean, what the intelligence agencies do, the professionals within the intelligence agencies, they always try to look for arguments or theories to justify what they do, ethically speaking. So, I mean, the Bible the Bible is sometimes used for that end, essentially. I mean, I'm sure that you know more about the spy stories in the Bible more than I do.
Well, I mean, to I suppose elaborate that a little. I mean, they're very strange stories. Moses does send. The word is spies. I mean, that's the only translation that you can get from that. Into the land of Canaan, and of course they discover our old friends the Nephilim.
Yeah.
And come back saying that we were as grasshoppers in their sight. That is poetry, but maybe the authors of those texts are actually saying something literal as well, which is very, very frightening indeed. So I don't know, it intrigues me that the intelligence community would use sacred scripture to justify its activities. I mean, is this some sort of, no pun intended, insecurity in their work, in their approach? I mean, why do they need that type of legitimation?
Well, I think it's more about people's views, really. I mean, it's a democracy. Yeah, we're living in a democracy, and they're worried that people might think that they're not needed. I mean, and these things usually arise from scandals. So one of the first things that that brought the intelligence agencies into the public eye was the revelations by the Church Committee in America. So Senator Frank Church. So he revealed secrets about the sorts of things that the CIA was doing at the time, and these things basically led to a huge scandal in America, and that essentially led to changes in the UK. So the UK government basically became worried that the same thing could happen in the UK. So they started to open up their the intelligence agencies into the public domain.
Another thing that interests me from our discussions off air, I mean, historically, there's always been a link between the paranormal, the occult, and the activities of the world of intelligence, the world of security spies. I mean, Nicholas Roerich, the great Russian explorer and painter, there were rumors he was actually, of course, spying for the Tsar? Aleister Crowley, the enfant terrible of British occultism, was actually meant to be a double agent working for British intelligence. That's curious. And of course, the original man of great worth and intelligence that stands out, Dr. Jonathan Dee, who of course was actually 007. That was his code in the intelligence service when he was spying on Poland for Elizabeth I. I mean, I think it's clear that the Russians certainly went gaga. I mean, they went over the top with looking for unusual ways to explore the secrets of the West. I mean, what is your opinion of that? And do you think we do it back to them, but we keep it much quieter?
I think, I mean, the intelligence agencies in the West are bureaucracies. I mean, if they do any sort of occult work, it's only just a minor part of it. And by minor, I don't mean a less important aspect of intelligence work, but I mean, it would be sort of in the deeper echelons of the intelligence agencies where these sorts of things occur. And obviously, if anything like this, these sorts of things happen, then they've done a really good job in keeping them secret. I
remember looking at your publications in International Relations. I mean, what interested me was what you chose not to say, almost as much as what you chose to write. Why were you looking at those particular topics? And why did was I right in feeling that you kept a lot of what you wanted to say under control and didn't actually go ahead with it?
I mean, there's a lot to say about intelligence agencies and what they do, and I mean, it's very difficult to, and really, it's very difficult to say what they actually do. I mean, these things are kept secret. When it comes to academic work, you need to be analytical. You have to look at these things with a critical eye, and it wouldn't be proper of me to write about things that aren't really aren't certain. So I mean, it's very difficult to answer that question. It's mainly a question of methodology, academic methodology. Are the things that we're saying, all the speculations that we're making, are they true or aren't they true? It's very difficult to say because the intelligence agencies keep these things secret. And if you're lucky, maybe you'll find the answer in 30 years when it's not, when the information isn't important anymore. I think that's quite a difficult question to answer.
Take it in a different direction. I mean, fake news, everybody's talking about that at the moment. Are the intelligence services in any better position than us to actually say what's fake news and what's not? And do they actually generate fake news for ideological purposes? What do you think of that?
Well, actually, I mean, that's a very interesting question. There's a perception, among people, the public, that the intelligence agencies know everything. That's simply not true. The intelligence agencies are always looking for ways to improve their analysis of what goes on in the world. So actually, they're in the same position as us. The only advantage that they have is their access to secret information that they've gathered either through human intelligence, so spies that are on the field, or through signals intelligence, which is basically the intelligence or the information that's been gathered from surveillance cameras, technology, the internet, and so forth. So really, they're not actually, they don't know everything. That people need to understand that they are not omnipresent beings. So, and there's also the perception that everyone is watched by the intelligence agencies. So when it comes to surveillance, the internet, GPS, cameras, everyone thinks that they're being watched all the time. Again, that's not simply true, because if that was true, then the intelligence agencies would need one person within the intelligence agencies to spy on one person, one public person, basically. So, there are lots of misperceptions about the work of the intelligence agencies in America and in the UK.
Well, maybe you need to clarify something at that point. I mean, what's the difference between an analyst and an operative?
Well, the analyst is the person who analyzes information behind a desk. So, they're the people who go to the office every day. The operative is the person on the field. Now, what's interesting is that, the intelligence agencies don't really have a so-called James Bond. The spy their spy is basically the person who recruits agents. They're basically agent recruiters. Now, the agent could be anyone. It could be someone within a government, so a foreign government, so let's say Russia's government, so a civil servant within the Russian government, or it could be a terrorist within a terrorist group like Al Qaeda or ISIS. So there aren't so-called James double O's within the intelligence agencies. If the intelligence agencies need to do covert action, so that's basically double O work, James Bond work, then they contact the special forces to do those sorts of things. But technically, the MI6 and MI5, they don't really have double O's, which might be a bit disappointing for some people, but that's the reality of intelligence.
It's very revealing. I didn't know that. That's very revealing. I mean, it's well known that you're developing an interest in Central Asia, maybe regarding food security and a number of other rather worrying issues of the future that's just about to launch itself upon us. I mean, is there a particular reason for Central Asia? Do you have a particular link with that part of the world, or why there? I mean, everybody knows I've got a passion for it, but my passion's literature. What's your link with it?
I mean, the only thing I can say is that the powers are shifting in that direction. In 20 years' time, America won't be the same America that we know of today. So, I mean, that probably is the main reason why I've become so interested in Central Asia. As you know, I'm a member of the Eurasian Creative Guild, and I'm hoping to become an advisory member of Eurasian Creative Guild quite soon. So, but generally speaking, I think that it's just about power. Political power, economic power. They're all shifting in that direction. They're shifting towards Asia and Central Asia specifically.
Interesting. Well, before I drag Paul in, I imagine Paul's going to bring up the conspiracy angle. For me, I mean, what actually is espionage? What does it mean on a daily basis? If I say I work in espionage, what would I be saying?
Well, yeah, I mean, I don't want to complicate things, but intelligence itself is quite a complicated thing to define. I mean, the main element is that it's about information. So intelligence is basically information, but it doesn't mean any kind of information. Information needs to be analyzed. It needs to be processed. So intelligence actually is a whole process. So it's about gathering intelligence. It's about processing intelligence, and it's about delivering the intelligence to the relevant people. So that in this case would be the politicians, and then again that would lead to demands. So what do the politicians need to know about? So, and then which they directed, then they direct those requests to the intelligence agencies to do. Now, what's also important to realize is that intelligence isn't just about espionage on foreign governments. It can also be military intelligence, which is often neglected. So, intelligence is actually a complicated, theory to discuss and analyze. So, but I would say that that's probably the first step towards understanding intelligence. So, information that is processed and delivered to the right people, and then a circle which goes from there.
Well, I think on that note, we need to bring in our resident conspiracy boy, Paul, my dear. What do you think?
Very interesting stuff. Hi, Daniel. Thanks for coming on the show. It's been really very interesting. I mean, this subject could go down many angles and stuff. Yeah, I mean, I am interested in the conspiracy side of it purely because I think that we're just surrounded by them at the moment. I mean, I want to cover one thing because it's a subject we covered actually on our last edition. Without spending too long explaining what it is, we interviewed a representative from an online anonymous movement called British Fight, which is connected to a phenomenon in America, QAnon, which is in a nutshell supposed to be certain spies and underground secret military and secret services basically trying to affect politics and reverse a lot of the corruption that's going on at the moment in various different ways. I mean, obviously, it's I'm not going to put you on the spot with it and stuff, but do you think this kind of thing at the moment is going on and possible on certain levels? There are, I guess you could say, underground coups, they're just attempts to change the whole political paradigm, so to speak. Would you say that?
The public, would that be by the public?
Well, no, I mean, Q basically he started posting online. He was posting various things, almost like code words for certain things that are coming up, and then actually predicting. I mean, this is why he's so popular now, because he has made some very heavyweight predictions that people gone, God, that's a bit good. And claims to be behind the Trump phenomenon, behind Brexit, behind all this whole populist thing that's building up, and it's almost like claiming to be beneath the surface. That's kind of pulling a lot of strings. That's making it all happen, so to speak. Does that sound realistic to you? That's something that you've come across, or?
Well, I mean, these sorts of things are possible. Gosh, that's very difficult to answer. I mean, if I try to I mean, right, let's be honest. The intelligence agencies, when they want to affect foreign governments, they do all sorts of things. They use propaganda. They, try to assassinate politicians and so on. These things sometimes lead to positive change. In most cases, they don't, and they lead to failures. So I mean, whether the person that or the group that you're talking about, whether they've actually done these have sort of succeeded in implementing those changes. I mean, it's quite doubtful. I mean, if the intelligence agencies can't successfully implement operations, then how can a group do that? So I mean, that I don't know.
Well, I mean that's reasonable what you've just said, but I think, I mean, I'm kind of open-minded with it. I'm not convinced. It's very intriguing. That's why I've had people on the show with it, and our other host that comes on, John, he's very into. He'd be very good to talk to you about it, because he'd probably be able to explain what it is a bit better than I am, because I kind of learn it more from him. But it's more, I think it is a case of that, almost like a war between it, that these people that are pulling these strings are involved in the secret intelligence, and kind of almost trying to kind of the good guys trying to expose the bad guys, I guess. But it is a difficult question to throw to you. If you knew who QAnon was and knew a bit more about the background, it might be easier for you to. But I thought I'd throw that at you. And another thing is, I mean, this is all based on the internet as well. I mean, I think David mentioned earlier about like Aleister Crowley that was sent out to. I think he worked for a New York paper during World War One, where his job was to propagate and to almost like make the Americans so annoyed at the Germans, like sort of he hyped how wonderful the Germans were and this and that in an attempt to sort of annoy the American public and twist their perceptions and support going to war against Germany. This was this is what Aleister Crowley said, and he said I should have been given a medal, not demonized, because people accused him of being a traitor, but he was saying actually it was a psychological kind of way of brainwashing the public, and that was just through the paper. Obviously, you didn't have the internet back then. How much has the internet changed this? Has the internet had a big effect on it?
I think the internet plays a very important role in spreading information, in propaganda. I mean, there is actually an academic article on Aleister Crowley's involvement with the intelligence agencies, with the British intelligence agencies. And from what I remember, basically the argument in the article was that he didn't actually have much of an impact on the public, the American public. But I mean, with the emergence of the internet, I think that these things, propaganda and spreading information, I think it's become a lot more important nowadays than it used to be. Than it might have been for Then it might have been through newspapers or other sorts of means.
And I mean, with Russia at the moment, that's obviously been a hot topic. What are your views on that with regards to Russia's involvement in? I mean, they've accused him of tampering with the Trump administration's success, as well as Brexit, and pretty much a lot of other things as well. With the spy, the murders that are going on at the moment. What's your whole take on that? I mean, it's obviously quite controversial, but
I mean, what we also need to remember is that governments and intelligence agencies, they're not just a unit, they're not a whole unit. There can be rogue elements within these institutions. So, again, it's quite difficult to say because we simply don't have enough information. But again, I mean, as I said, I think, we need to remember that there could be rogue elements. We've seen this, sort of thing, such rogue elements, throughout the history of the intelligence agencies and so on, in Russia, in America, and in the UK. So my only comment would be that we need to just sort of pay attention to these aspects as well.
Oh yeah, I mean it's yeah. Well, it's the thing is at the moment. I mean, we've covered a lot of fake news on this show a lot, and to be honest, it's almost like because the people that create fake news and propaganda like that, I think their best way of getting out of it is muddying the waters. So there's just fake news everywhere now, and it's difficult to tell which is which, and it's an interesting where it's all going to go. I mean, ultimately, I like to believe the truth normally rises to the top, and that's what normally holds water. But we'll see. But David, have you got anything to add to anything I've said there?
Oh, fake news. It's all fake. Why do we swallow what people are saying so easily? Everything Theresa May and bloody Boris Johnson says is fake, and it always has been.
Oh yeah, no.
I mean, fake news, and a couple of fantasies join in to the ideological drilling into our heads. Oh gosh, I mean, this is a subject that intrigues me. I don't know quite where I'm going with it myself, but it intrigues me. I mean, files. there are rumours that even I've got a file. MI5 was kept an eye on me. I don't know if that's true or not. I mean, someone was saying to me years back that anyone who raises their head above the parapet automatically has a file. I mean, does that sound real? Does that sound likely? I mean, that must be hundreds of thousands of files. Do you think there's any truth to that sort of rumour? Or is that scaremongering on the part of the ignorant or a power elite that wants us to believe that? What do you think?
No, I think that it is true. The only thing, though, is that the intelligence agencies can only keep, well, legally speaking, they can only keep information about people for a certain amount of time. And I think currently it's 1 year or perhaps 2 years. I mean, the only way that we could say it is possible is with the help of technology. I mean, through the use of algorithms and powerful processing computers. I think that they can keep huge amounts of information on individual people. So I think it is real. I think. And legally speaking, it's also been mentioned by official documents.
I mean, how closely are the activities of the intelligence community monitored by government? I mean, academics, present company accepted, love us all to believe something I actually don't, that this is a democracy. I can't see that. A democracy must be where an informed electorate, nobody, the British electorate, not informed, I mean, that are making free choices. I mean, how true is all of that? And to me, that just, they're propagating myths that simply aren't there, that simply aren't true. What do you think of all that, Dan?
Well, in the UK, there are a number of mechanisms that are used to hold the intelligence agencies accountable. Now, whether they are effective in doing so is actually questionable. The most important mechanism is the Intelligence and Security Committee. So they've actually got their own website that people can have a look at, and I think it's quite useful because the reports that they they've released for the public mention the works of all the intelligence agencies in the UK. So MI6, MI5, GCHQ, the Special Branch. So I think with regards to accountability, there are a number of mechanisms in the UK. But personally, I don't think that they're effective. The Intelligence and Security Committee needs to negotiate with the intelligence agencies if they actually want information. So the whole thing is based on negotiation. They don't have the power to, go into the intelligence agencies and look at documents to see if there are any legal, if there have been any legal operations or illegal operations. So the whole thing in the UK is questionable. The same thing applies to America. I mean, what the British government essentially tried to copy what the Americans were doing a few decades ago. So I think it all needs to be updated, from a policy point of view.
I suppose what I was getting at, that was a sort of meandery statement, wasn't it, a minute ago? I mean, what democracy? We're all told we live in a democracy, but there's an uninformed and largely ignorant electorate in Britain. Love you all, but let's face some facts. That don't really know anything about democratic processes and don't really care. It's still point scoring in a schoolyard. Therefore, what is it these people, these intelligence agencies are trying to do, and how can it be to maintain democratic procedures and processes when they're not really there in the first place. How close are we to the Soviet Union? I mean, lots of my Russian friends keep teasing me that this actually is the new Soviet Union. I mean, is there any truth to that?
Well, I mean, that argument is quite difficult to resist. I suppose the only defense or the only opposing argument for that would be that, places like, countries like Britain have mechanisms that hold the intelligence agencies accountable, whereas the ones in the Soviet Union or Russia now, that they don't have such mechanisms that, try to make the intelligence agencies more democratic. I mean, that is an oxymoron, obviously, but how can a society be democratic if secrets are being kept from the public? I mean, that's not really democratic. But I suppose that's the only defense that could be given.
I suppose what I'm interested in exploring here. I mean, mythology is not a word I use often because it's actually quite a technical word and it means lots of things. I mean, the imagery, let's go for that instead. Not mythology. Let's look at the imagery. You've either got the super cool spy that seems to know everything. Even when they're trying to solve problems, they basically know what the questions are. I mean, in real life, most people don't even know the questions, which is why they can never get to the answers. Got that on one side, James Bond biffing his opponents in various movie-like scenarios. Or you've got the sort of Kafkaesque, endless bureaucracies grinding people down, including the people that work for the endless bureaucracy. So it's on one hand, it's cloak and dagger and romance, and it's very exciting. And on the other hand, it's this sort of grim Orwellian super state that really is only trying to maintain itself at the end of the day and not really achieve anything. I mean, is there any truth to any of this imagery, or is it just sad human beings trying to make a living?
I don't think there is any truth to the romance of it. I think it's all just bureaucratic. I would say it's more like the Orwellian image that you just mentioned.
Oh God, that's depressing. We need some conspiracy input. Paul, save me from this feeling of depression.
Well, yeah, no, it's fascinating stuff. I mean, I keep thinking of North Korea, and that's always been a strange one for me because they're so cut off from the rest of the world. Yet we do seem to have certain knowledge about them. Is a lot of that knowledge propaganda, or do you think that it's even a nation like North Korea? It's the West's got its tentacles within it.
Oh, gosh, no. I mean, Well, I mean, so I'd probably say that the West, the West has tried to get itself into North Korea through the intelligence agencies, through covert action. I mean, So one of the things that the Western intelligence agencies did to break down the Soviet Union was through propaganda.
Mm.
So, I mean, obviously they could do the same thing with regards to North Korea, and the same thing is happening very well with Iran. Actually, fake, news propaganda is spread all over Iran. Now, Iran, the Iranian people, the public, they've got access to, these sorts of information. But, the North Korean people, because it's a bit of a closed society, I would probably suggest, that they don't really have access to the propaganda. That they wouldn't be able to have that access. Just like the Chinese. I mean, the Chinese are closed off. They cannot access Facebook. They cannot access other sorts of Western social media.
It's a worrying thing is that's the direction that we're heading at in the West at the moment, or at least the direction they'd like us to with a lot of the bills the EU have tried to pass and there's just slowly seem to be working. I think they're trying it, but the public are so used to liberty here in the West in terms of stuff like that being free and non-censorship. I think they're just trying to tiptoe, and I'd like to think they're having a hard time doing it at the moment. But the worrying thing is, I don't think they're going to stop trying. No,
yeah. That's a good point. Yeah.
Well, David, I mean, that's I'm kind of.
I need to chip in with one thing before we finish. I knew a dissident historian a couple of years ago. I don't actually agree with his political views, and I won't name this individual because this individual is in a very difficult situation anyway. So what I will say is that when he was bringing out an exceedingly controversial book on World War II, not only was his home raided and certain chapters of the new book, interestingly not the whole book, how did they know which ones to take? Certain chapters were confiscated, and simultaneously his publisher and his agent were raided, and exactly the same chapters were taken for the public good. That strikes me as much more sinister and much more coordinated than people want to admit in a democracy like Britain. So do we need to be afraid of these people or not?
I would definitely say yes. One of the things that I came across quite a lot of times was that, when the intelligence agencies aren't kept under control, they can do anything. They need someone, or an institute. Well, maybe not. I'm not really sure what sort of a mechanism would work best, but there needs to be some sort of an overwatch, or some sort of an eye over them, over the intelligence agencies themselves, because they cannot be just left on their own. Otherwise, they can just do what they want, and obviously, they don't have a limit on their budget because of obvious national security issues, from terrorism and foreign espionage. So I think yes, definitely. I think that that the intelligence agencies need to be kept under control and watched all the time by the public, the media, and so on. So.
Well, Paul, that's my knighthood gone. Any last questions before Dan goes and gets a well-deserved rest?
Well, no, I'd just like to thank Daniel for coming on the show. It's been really interesting, and
thanks for having me.
It's great. You're always welcome back, and it's one of those subjects that, I mean, with ongoing news and stuff, it'd be great to have you back and hear your thoughts. We're kind of going through a lot of changes here on the show at the moment, and it's been a bit sparser than usual, but we're kind of bringing various aspects of our community together, and we're thinking of maybe some ideas of some round table talks, perhaps live streams doing it, but it's all in talk at the moment, and we're just our YouTube channel is getting a few more subscribers, and maybe we'll start using that more. But it'll be great for you to come back and because obviously like some sort of intelligent minds to come and throw their views and ideas onto it. It makes it more interesting for our listeners and everyone to check out. So it'd be great to have you back on again.
Thank you very much, Paul. Thank you.
Well, Paul, that was Daniele Irandoost. What did you make of that rather intriguing conversation?
Well, it's interesting talking to someone that's obviously studied it a lot and knows what he's talking about coming from that perspective, a matter of fact perspective, because that's what you've got to, with all these conspiracies and ideas, you've got to also have I guess it's a case of learning the rules before you break them, and I guess you could look at Daniele as someone who's learnt the rules, and then it's interesting to come from that perspective now. But yeah, it's interesting stuff, and it just shows you how much of a big world it is as well. That whole thing, it was interesting when he said, there's not one group of this stuff, and which I think the QAnons and all that will find intriguing, because it's almost like there could be a world within the world itself. It's kind of its own area, isn't it? It's almost spooky.
It goes beyond even that. You get worlds within worlds within worlds within worlds.
Yeah.
And, do they all agree on stuff? I bet they don't. I mean, that's real life. I bet they don't. What worries me, what intrigues me, is there any coordination between these different factions fighting for whatever?
Mm.
And if there is, how far does it go? I mean, they're all human beings at the end of the day. You know, we're all still listening to David Icke and these lizard people. Well, I mean, they must be bloody well coordinated, mustn't they?
Yeah.
But, you know, let's look at real life in front of us. You know, the spy that comes home at night and he's tired and he's hungry, and is there anything in the oven?
Mm.
You know, that's the reality. You know, Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy, sort of these sort of little people with little jobs, and it's all greasy and it's all grimy, and they all think they've got a link to some type of ideology, but maybe they do and maybe they don't. You know, the reality of it all, I think, is not really operational. It's analytical, and then you're left with a series of people behind desks looking at photographs and trying to work out the meaning of what somebody said last night.
Mm.
You know, I mean, one of my favorite conspiracy theories from the 80s was that every single Chinese takeaway in Britain actually was recording all the conversations of people going in there after the pub when they were drunk and sending them back to Beijing. And I remember saying to somebody at the time, my God, they must be listening to an awful lot of rubbish.
Mm.
You know, and is it worth anybody's time doing that?
Well, nowadays,
So there's, you know, there's the romance and then there's the reality.
Yeah.
And I suspect the reality is human and therefore a lot more scary.
yeah. Well, there's the algorithm. What Daniele was talking about with algorithms, that would take care of that problem today, because it can just literally program to pick up certain words, even the way, even accents and stuff. I mean, anyone with some of this technology where you only speak and it listens to what you say and tells things. So, you know, it's certainly any conspiracies out there. The more time goes on with technology, they're more realistic. But the thing is, my view of conspiracy has always been they're there and they're real. Just don't plunge yourself too deep into them straight away. You know, normally there's no smoke without fire, but it's probably most of the time you're never really onto it 100%. So don't try to be. Just keep it arm's length. Have an open mind. Listen to what they say, and then keep your own peace of mind.
You're the conspiracy boy of the show. I mean, our old listeners know I'm just simply not.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, are there financial conspiracies? Yes, because as I've said before, you can see them bloody in front of you. These people have no shame whatsoever. Do I go along with the rest of it? I probably don't, like you know that. That doesn't mean they don't exist at all, but it does mean a lot of it must be taken with a medieval pinch of salt.
Yeah.
You know, there were no algorithms in those days, but everybody knew their conversation was being listened to in Beijing. So, you know, I mean, are there breakaway civilizations? I doubt it. You know, I mean, okay, so there's a breakaway civilization that's spying on us actively. So, okay, what does the guy feel like when he goes to his college reunion? Does he feel like some sort of super space dude, or does he feel like a sort of aging old hack with marital problems and his kids don't understand him? You know, I mean, the human reality of it all mustn't be forgotten.
Yeah.
And that's when I start getting really skeptical about it all. And, you know, we've just got to keep our feet on the ground, and maybe then we can get some truth out of all of this.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, I agree with a lot of that. And for me, this sort of anything to do with like the QAnon movement or British Fight movement, it's I'm just more hopeful than anything. It's I want to believe it because I want to believe there are certain groups out there that can have a certain power to make change and affect it. So I'll admit there is a part of it that's me wanting to believe it that makes me believe in it a bit more. But I think, you know, in some cases there's nothing wrong with that. You don't want to grow up too much. You want to keep that sort of innocence, a bit of youth, because sometimes good stuff does happen. You know, you've got to be there to grab it when it does and to help it. But we shall see. I mean, over time tells, doesn't it?
Good stuff happens. There are powers above us all. Good stuff happens. You know, I don't think we need to remain children for that idea.
Yeah.
What we do need, conversely, is to grow up and know these people that are so, you know, these so-called representatives need a damn good thump and tell them to get out of their jobs.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, on another note, it's been great having you back on because it's been a while. So hopefully it won't be as long until the next time you're here with us with another guest, which won't be too long either, because that is probably what we've got time for. And we've got other interesting guests in the pipeline, and I meant what I said earlier when I was speaking to Daniele, that you know, it's been a bit sparse, so the show's a bit slow at the moment, but it's because I'm juggling with ideas. It's taken to change the show at the moment, and it's been going a good few years, so I'm cooking up some ideas. John White will be back on the show. He's been very, very busy with the British fight movement at the moment. Obviously David Parry is always going to be here with us, and Shana as well. I'm still in touch with Shana, so we're still juggling, and we're going to put some new ideas together and see how it goes. So keep telling your friends about the show, keep linking the show, more importantly keep downloading the show, and until the next time, we'll be seeing you. Bye.
Chelsea.